The ocean is a master of illusions. One moment it glistens like a sapphire under the sun, whispering promises of adventure. The next, it can turn into a wall of chaos, swallowing everything in its path. For Steven Callahan, this truth would become terrifyingly real. Imagine being hurled into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, completely alone, with only a fragile life raft to cling to. The horizon stretches endlessly in every direction. Waves crash over you like mountains of liquid steel. The sun burns by. Day, the cold bites by night, and every second is a battle against the impossible. In 1981, Steven set sail aboard the Napoleon Solo, a small sailboat stocked with supplies and his carefully laid plans. To the casual observer, it was a daring solo journey across the Atlantic, the kind of challenge that tests skill, courage, and determination. But the ocean has a way of turning even the best-laid plans into chaos. Within days, Steven would discover that survival at sea is not about adventure. It's about confronting absolute vulnerability. The early days were deceptively calm. The waves rolled gently beneath the hull. The wind filled the sails just enough, and for a moment Steven felt untouchable. But the Atlantic never stays calm for long. Storm clouds gathered with a sudden intensity, winds whipped at the rigging, and waves began rising like liquid walls. In an instant, his small boat was no longer a vessel of freedom. It became a trap in a raging wilderness of water. Then came the wave, immense, relentless, unforgiving. The Napoleon Solo shattered, tossing Steven into the merciless sea. Supplies scattered, tools vanished, and the only thing that remained was a life raft, barely inflated, barely capable of keeping him afloat. Alone, soaked and disoriented, he realized the terrifying reality. Hundreds of miles from land, completely isolated, there was no one to save him. Every instinct screamed panic, but panic would kill him faster than the waves. Steven's survival instincts kicked in immediately. He stabilized the raft, salvaged what little gear survived, and began the mental calculations that would keep him alive. Every drop of water mattered. Every piece of food was rationed like gold. Sunstroke, dehydration, storms, even the threat of sharks became daily realities. The Atlantic was no longer a playground. It was a relentless teacher, and Steven was a pupil learning lessons in pain, endurance, and ingenuity. By nightfall of the first day, the truth settled in. This was not a journey, not an adventure, not a test of courage. This was a fight for life against one of the most indifferent forces on Earth. The ocean stretched endlessly, but within the fragile confines of his raft, Steven discovered something astonishing. His mind, sharp and disciplined, was his greatest weapon. Every decision, every improvisation, every ounce of patience would be pushed to the limit. And so began 76 days of unrelenting struggle. Days filled with hunger, thirst, exposure, storms, isolation, and the constant uncertainty of whether he would see another sunrise. Each wave, each gust of wind, each scorching day and freezing night would test the very boundaries of human endurance. This is the story of a man who faced the Atlantic alone, and whose survival would become one of the most extraordinary tales of human resilience ever recorded. The first hours alone on the Atlantic were terrifying, but the first full day brought an even harsher reality: hunger, thirst, and relentless exposure. Steven Callahan quickly realized that surviving at sea wasn't just about staying afloat. It was about adapting to the brutal, unforgiving rhythm of the ocean. Every wave threatened to tip his raft, every gust of wind could tear his shelter apart, and the sun burned with a ferocity he had never experienced on land. Steven had only a few small items salvaged from the wreck. A life raft, a small amount of rations, a few pieces of emergency gear, and an improvised water collection system. He knew that if he wasted anything, even a single drop of water, it could mean the difference between life and death. The first priority was survival basics: stay afloat, stay hydrated, and avoid exposure. Simple tasks on land became monumental, challenges on the rolling, unpredictable surface of the Atlantic. The sun was relentless during the day. Steven used the raft's material and his knowledge of sailing to create a makeshift shade. Even then, sweat soaked his clothes, salt dried on his skin, and the heat sapped energy faster than he could replenish it. By the third day, hunger began gnawing at him. His small ration of food would not last long, and he was still far from any land or rescue. Ingenuity became Steven's lifeline. He rigged a system to collect rainwater whenever clouds appeared, understanding that dehydration could strike at any moment. He improvised fishing gear from scraps of rope and plastic to catch small fish drifting near his raft. Every small success felt like a victory against the ocean's indifference. Each night, as he lay in the raft, shivering under the cold wind, he recorded notes in a waterproof journal. These notes were more than documentation. They were a way to keep his mind sharp and maintain a sense of control amid the chaos. Isolation was a constant, invisible threat. No sound but the ocean. No light but the sun and stars. No human voice, no companionship. Many would succumb to despair under such conditions, but Steven's mental discipline became his anchor. He forced himself to maintain routines, rationing water, checking the raft for leaks, adjusting his improvised sails, and practicing survival tasks. Each routine was a victory against panic and hopelessness. As days passed, he faced the harshest lessons of survival. Every decision carried weight. Should he fish in dangerous waters where sharks might linger? Should he drink small amounts of water now or ration it for the future? Every choice was a delicate balance between immediate need and long-term endurance. One mistake could cost him everything. Even the ocean itself became a teacher. Steven began observing patterns in the waves, currents, and winds. He learned when to let the raft drift and when to adjust his small sails. He noted the behavior of fish and birds as indicators of nearby land. This constant attention to detail, combined with his ingenuity, slowly transformed him from a passive victim into a survivor capable of adapting to one of the harshest environments on Earth. By the end of the first week, hunger and fatigue were constant companions, but Steven had established routines that kept him alive. Each day survived was a psychological boost, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable odds, the human mind and spirit can find ways to endure. Every sunrise became a victory, and every sunset a chance to reflect, adapt, and prepare for the next day. It was in these first days that Steven Callahan learned the most crucial lesson of survival. It was not the storms, not the sharks, not the endless sun or freezing nights that would break him. It would be giving in to despair. As long as he stayed alert, inventive, and mentally strong, he had a chance. And with that fragile but vital understanding, Steven began the slow, painstaking journey of 76 days at sea. A journey that would push him beyond the limits of hunger, dehydration, isolation, and the relentless power of the Atlantic Ocean. By the second week, the Atlantic had revealed itself in full force. Steven Callahan was no longer simply surviving. He was fighting an endless war with nature itself. Every day brought new challenges, each more terrifying than the last. The small, life raft that had once felt like salvation now seemed fragile against the immense, unrelenting power of the ocean. Storms became a constant threat. Towering waves crashed over the raft, tossing Steven violently, threatening to capsize the fragile vessel. Rain pelted him like bullets, drenching him through and through. He learned quickly that panic was deadly. Each maneuver required calm precision, adjusting his raft, securing his few belongings, and holding on with all his strength. Even a single lapse could send him into the cold, endless water, where survival chances would plummet instantly. Then there were the sharks. The Atlantic teemed with life, and Stephen knew he was sharing the ocean with predators. Shadows beneath the water reminded him that the raft, though small and floating, made him a target. Fishing became a delicate, nerve-wracking activity. Every movement had to be calculated, every piece of bait carefully handled. The sight of fins circling the raft was terrifying, yet he could not afford to stop eating. Hunger was relentless, and he had to take measured risks to survive. Isolation was a different kind of threat, silent but no less dangerous. Without human contact, time blurred. Days and nights became an endless cycle of sun, wind, and salt water. The mind, unaccustomed to such extreme solitude, begins to play tricks. Sounds of the sea seemed to become voices. Shadows in the water became imagined threats. Stephen realized that survival was not just about physical endurance. It was about mastering the mind, keeping it sharp, focused, and resilient against despair. To combat this, he created routines, rituals, and systems. Every day he would check the raft for leaks, collect rainwater when possible, fish for food, and carefully ration every drop of water and morsel of sustenance. Each task, however small, reinforced his control over a world that seemed otherwise uncontrollable. The ocean might be vast and indifferent, but his discipline and ingenuity were powerful weapons against it. Stephen also became deeply attuned to the natural world around him. Birds, the movement of the waves, and even the clouds became guides, indicators of nearby land or changes in weather. He observed fish behavior to anticipate their movements, tracked the sun to maintain direction, and learned to read subtle shifts in wind and water currents. These small skills, often unnoticed by ordinary people, became the difference between hope and despair. Storms were terrifying, but they were also brief compared to the slow, grinding challenges of hunger, thirst, and sun exposure. Days passed, where he felt the weight of the world pressing down. His muscles ached, his skin burned from salt and sun, and his lips cracked from dehydration. Nights were bitterly cold, the wind slicing through his improvised shelter. Every second was a struggle to maintain body heat, avoid injury, and keep morale intact. Sharks, storms, hunger, dehydration, and isolation were constant adversaries, but Stephen refused to succumb. His mind, sharpened by necessity, became a survival instrument. He documented his days in a waterproof journal, noting every observation, every adjustment, and every small victory. Writing gave him structure, purpose, and a way to assert control over a world that otherwise offered none. By the end of the second week, Stephen had learned one immutable truth. Survival in the open ocean is as much a mental game as it is physical. The ocean does not forgive mistakes, nor does it offer mercy. Only adaptability, ingenuity, and relentless focus could keep a man alive. Each day that he endured was a testament to the power of human resilience, a reminder that even in the most extreme isolation, the will to live can shine brighter than the endless waves surrounding him. By the third week, Steven Callahan had entered a rhythm dictated entirely by survival. Every day was a test of creativity, patience, and endurance. The ocean had already proven it could destroy his boat, toss him into uncertainty, and isolate him from the world. Now it was demanding something more, the ability to live for weeks with almost nothing. Food and water had become the most precious resources, and Stephen's ingenuity would determine whether he lived or perished. Drinking water was the most immediate concern. Salt water was deadly, and even the small supply he had salvaged from the wreck would not last long. Stephen quickly learned the value of rain. Every dark cloud became a potential lifeline. He rigged an improvised rain collection system using tarps and containers, constantly monitoring the skies for the slightest hint of precipitation. Even a single cup of collected rain could sustain him through scorching days and freezing nights. Fishing became both a necessity and a gamble. With no proper gear, Stephen had to improvise. He fashioned hooks, lines, and lures from the fragments of his destroyed boat, testing different techniques until he could catch enough fish to supplement his dwindling supplies. Each catch was a triumph, each failure a reminder of the precariousness of his situation. Sharks lurked beneath, so every move required precision and courage. A single misstep could endanger the only source of sustenance he had. Rationing became an art form. Every sip of water, every bite of fish, every morsel of food was measured and carefully planned. Steven learned to delay gratification, knowing that the ocean could test his patience in ways no human had imagined. Hunger was relentless, gnawing at his energy and focus, but through careful planning, he maintained just enough strength to continue surviving. Shelter was another challenge. The life raft offered minimal protection, and exposure to sun, wind, and salt water could quickly lead to exhaustion, sunstroke, or hypothermia. Steven used the materials at hand to improvise shade and cover, adjusting constantly to the sun's movement and the wind's direction. Even these small adjustments made a difference between life and death. In addition to food and water, maintaining mental focus became critical. The isolation of the open ocean could have shattered his mind, but Steven used routines, observation, and small rituals to maintain sanity. He monitored the waves, tracked currents, and noted changes in the wind. Birds and fish became indicators, and he learned to read the environment for survival cues. Each observation was a small victory, each decision a calculated step toward another day alive. Despite his ingenuity, Steven faced moments of despair. The sun burned relentlessly, storms appeared without warning, and sharks circled with eerie persistence. Sleep was often impossible, replaced by shifts of vigilance and monitoring. Every day was a balancing act between conserving energy, avoiding danger, and using every resource at his disposal wisely. Yet it was in these moments of extreme adversity that Steven discovered the remarkable adaptability of the human spirit. He learned that survival is not about brute strength alone. It is about creativity, patience, and the ability to turn even the smallest resource into a lifeline. A piece of rope became a fishing line, a container became a water collector, and a makeshift sail could steer him toward hope. By the end of the third week, Steven had established a fragile but functional survival system. He had learned to work with the ocean, not against it, and each small success reinforced his determination. Hunger, thirst, storms, and isolation were no longer just threats. They were challenges he could meet with skill, patience, and ingenuity. And as the days continued, each moment would test him further, preparing him for the longest, most grueling part of his journey, weeks alone, battling the elements, uncertainty, and the relentless pressure of survival itself. As the days stretched into weeks, Steven Callahan faced a new kind of battle, one that was invisible but no less dangerous than the storms and sharks surrounding him. Isolation is a relentless adversary. The Atlantic, vast and indifferent, offered no companionship, no voice, no sign that another human existed. The mind, starved of interaction, can turn against itself, conjuring fear, despair, and hallucinations. For Steven, maintaining mental resilience became as critical as staying afloat or catching food. By the fourth week, the relentless repetition of survival tasks began to weigh heavily. Each day demanded the same precision. Check the raft for leaks, collect water, fish, ration food, protect against the sun, endure the cold at night. The monotony, combined with uncertainty and danger, could easily break a person. The sea seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction, a cruel reminder of how utterly alone he was. But Steven had learned early on that survival depended not only on action, but on attitude. He refused to succumb to hopelessness. Every sound of the waves, every shadow under the raft, every passing cloud carried potential danger. Sleep was a luxury, often interrupted by storms, the swells of the sea, or sudden winds that threatened to overturn the raft. Even rest required constant vigilance. Despite the exhaustion, Steven forced himself to maintain routines, rituals that anchored him to reality and gave structure to a world that offered none. Each day survived was proof that he could endure. Hunger and dehydration, though managed, took their toll on his body. Muscles weakened from limited movement, skin blistered from sun exposure, lips cracked from salt and wind, and even minor injuries could become life-threatening in such conditions. He learned to move cautiously, conserve energy, and use every resource sparingly. The human body, he realized, could adapt in ways he had never imagined, but only if the mind remained focused and disciplined. Psychological strain came in waves. Moments of despair were inevitable. Thoughts of what life might be like on land, of the loved ones he might never see again, threatened to overwhelm him. But Steven turned these moments into fuel for survival. He reminded himself that panic and despair would only accelerate death. Instead, he focused on the immediate, what he could do to survive the next hour, the next day. By breaking his ordeal into manageable challenges, he preserved his mental energy and his hope. Nature itself was unpredictable. Sharks circled beneath the raft, curious or hunting. Storms erupted without warning, tossing him violently, soaking him to the bone, and testing the raft's fragile structure. Each wave, each gust of wind, reminded him that the Atlantic was both beautiful and deadly, a constant teacher of humility. And yet, even amid danger, Steven found moments of awe, dolphins swimming nearby, stars blazing in the night sky, and the shimmering reflection of sunlight on the endless water. These fleeting glimpses of beauty reminded him why survival mattered, why life was worth fighting for. Steven's ingenuity, honed over the first weeks, became his lifeline. Fishing, rationing, water collection, raft repairs, every task required careful thought and creativity. Mistakes could be fatal, so he worked with precision, even when exhaustion threatened to cloud his judgment. His mind became a finely tuned instrument, focused on one objective: staying alive. By the end of the 5th week, Steven Callahan had transformed. What began as fear and desperation had evolved into a remarkable display of human resilience. The body weakened, but the mind sharpened. The ocean was still a formidable adversary, but he had learned to navigate its challenges, to observe and adapt, to survive not just physically, but mentally. Every sunrise was a victory, every small success a reason to keep going. Isolation, hunger, storms, and sharks were relentless, but Steven's determination never wavered. Each day alone in the Atlantic was a testament to the extraordinary capacity of the human spirit to endure, adapt, and fight against seemingly insurmountable odds. And as the days turned into 6, 7, and eventually 8 weeks, the ultimate test of survival loomed ahead. Maintaining hope and focus when the end of this ordeal still seemed impossibly far away. By the 6th week, Steven Callahan had been alone on the Atlantic for more than a month. The ocean had stripped him down to the raw essentials: his mind, his body, and his will to survive. Every day was a battle against hunger, thirst, exposure, and the sheer unpredictability of the sea. But amid the relentless struggle, moments of ingenuity and small breakthroughs became his lifeline, proof that even in the most desperate circumstances, human creativity could turn despair into survival. One of the most crucial breakthroughs came with fishing. The ocean was teeming with life, but catching it without proper equipment was almost impossible. Steven improvised relentlessly. Using scraps of line, hooks fashioned from metal fragments, and bait scavenged from previous catches, he discovered methods to lure fish to the surface. Each fish he caught was not just food, it was hope. It validated the countless hours of trial and error and reminded him that adaptation could outwit the vast, indifferent ocean. Water, always scarce, demanded constant attention. Rain collection was a delicate science. A single storm could provide a day's supply, but if clouds passed without precipitation, he faced dehydration. Steven learned to ration water meticulously, drinking just enough to maintain energy while avoiding exhaustion. Each drop became priceless, a measure of life itself. His discipline in managing water intake would be tested daily, and mistakes could have been fatal. The ocean itself was both adversary and teacher. Storms struck without warning, waves tossed the raft like a toy, and nights were bitterly cold. At one point, a particularly violent storm nearly capsized the raft. Steven clung on for hours, fighting exhaustion and fear, carefully balancing the raft and keeping his makeshift sail aligned. By the time the storm subsided, he was drenched, shivering, and physically drained, but alive. These near-death experiences sharpened his skills, teaching him instinctively how to respond under extreme pressure. Isolation, however, was the most relentless challenge. Weeks without human contact tested every ounce of his mental strength. The mind craves companionship, and the absence of it can lead to hallucinations, despair, and despair-driven mistakes. Steven fought this by creating routines, documenting his days in a waterproof journal, and giving structure to each 24-hour period. Rituals became survival tools, offering him a semblance of control in a world governed entirely by chaos. Even small successes were monumental. Catching enough fish for a meal, securing a steady supply of rainwater, or repairing a tear in the raft's material were victories that reinvigorated his spirit. Steven learned to celebrate these moments internally, knowing that morale was as vital as food and water. Every triumph, however minor it seemed, reinforced the belief that he could survive this ordeal. Sharks continued to circle, a constant reminder of vulnerability. But Steven learned to coexist with these predators. He observed patterns, understood their behavior, and modified his fishing techniques to minimize risk. The ocean had taught him patience, observation, and adaptability, skills that were as essential as the raft or the food he caught. By the end of the 6th week, Steven had transformed isolation into resilience, scarcity into resourcefulness, and fear into calculated action. Each day was still grueling, and every hour carried potential disaster. But he had proven to himself that survival was not just about luck. It was about skill, ingenuity, and unwavering determination. These breakthroughs would carry him through the final weeks of his epic journey. They were reminders that even in the harshest environment on Earth, the human mind could find solutions to problems that seemed insurmountable. Steven's journey was a testament to human creativity, endurance, and the unyielding will to live, even when the ocean seemed infinite, indifferent, and unforgiving. As Steven Callahan entered the 7th week of his ordeal, the Atlantic had transformed from a relentless enemy into a demanding teacher. Hunger, thirst, exhaustion, and isolation had tested his body and mind to their absolute limits. Yet despite the unending challenges, hope had become his most powerful tool. Every day, he reminded himself that survival was possible, not through luck, but through vigilance, skill, and unwavering determination. By this point, Steven had developed a rhythm: catch fish, collect water, repair the raft, monitor weather, and keep a log of his daily observations. Each routine had become a lifeline, anchoring him against the chaos surrounding him. But as days stretched on, the weight of isolation pressed harder, and even the routines he had relied on began to feel like monumental tasks. Every movement required immense effort, and fatigue clawed at his body relentlessly. Yet amid this struggle, glimmers of hope appeared. Birds circling in the distance hinted at land. Subtle changes in currents suggested proximity to islands, and patterns in the waves became guides for navigation. These small signs, though uncertain, fueled Steven's determination. He clung to every hint, analyzing it with precision and patience. The Atlantic was still indifferent, but he had learned to read its language, turning subtle cues into vital information. Physical exhaustion reached extremes. His body had lost significant weight, muscles ached constantly, and minor injuries from exposure became persistent threats. Dehydration and sunburn left him vulnerable, but he continued to ration water, manage sun exposure, and protect his fragile raft from the harsh elements. Every small task was a battle, yet giving up was never an option. Survival demanded focus, ingenuity, and endurance beyond anything he had ever imagined. Sharks continued to circle, ever-present reminders of the ocean's danger. Each fishing attempt required careful calculation, minimizing risk while maximizing the chance of catching food. Even a single misstep could prove fatal. Steven learned to coexist with these predators, turning potential threats into manageable challenges through observation, patience, and clever strategy. Then, after 76 grueling days, the moment of salvation arrived. Exhausted, weathered, and nearly broken, Steven spotted a ship on the horizon. Every instinct surged to life. Using the last of his energy, he fashioned a signal with the limited materials available, a combination of mirrors, bright fabric, and frantic gestures. The signal caught the attention of the crew, who altered course and moved toward the lone figure adrift on the endless Atlantic. Rescue was not immediate. Even the final approach required careful navigation. The ocean, still unpredictable, tossed Steven's raft with every swell. But hope, once ignited, became unstoppable. The crew reached him, pulling him aboard after weeks of unimaginable isolation and hardship. Weak, sunburned, and malnourished, he was alive, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the incredible resilience of a single determined individual. Recovery was arduous. His body needed time to heal from malnutrition, dehydration, and exposure. His mind required adjustment after enduring more than 2 months of isolation. Yet Steven's journey became a story that inspired millions. It was a story not just of survival against nature, but of the extraordinary capabilities of human endurance, ingenuity, and hope. The Atlantic had tested him in ways that few could imagine. Waves had battered him, hunger had gnawed at him, storms had threatened to erase him, and isolation had pushed him to the brink. But through skill, observation, discipline, and an unyielding will to live, Steven Callahan survived 76 days alone on the open ocean, a feat that remains one of the most remarkable true survival stories ever recorded. His story is a lesson. The human spirit can endure the unimaginable, adapt against impossible odds, and emerge victorious even when the world seems indifferent. Steven Callahan's 76 days adrift in the Atlantic Ocean remind us that hope, determination, and ingenuity are not just abstract ideals. They are the very tools that keep us alive in the face of the impossible. When Steven Callahan finally set foot on solid ground, the ordeal of 76 days adrift on the Atlantic seemed almost unreal. The ocean that had tested him so relentlessly had given him back life, but it had also left an indelible mark on his body, mind, and spirit. His survival was not just a miracle of endurance. It was a masterclass in observation, ingenuity, patience, and the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit. Looking back, Steven realized that survival in the open ocean was not about brute strength or luck. It was about adaptation. Every skill he improvised, every ration calculated, every observation of the natural world had become a lifeline. He had transformed desperation into creativity, fear into calculated action, and isolation into discipline. Each challenge, no matter how small, required focus and ingenuity, proving that the human mind is the most powerful survival tool of all. Perhaps the most profound lesson was mental resilience. Weeks alone on a raft, with only the vast, indifferent Atlantic surrounding him, could have broken anyone. Yet Steven's mental fortitude allowed him to maintain hope, plan meticulously, and act decisively. It was his ability to stay calm under pressure, to create routines, and to focus on achievable goals that ultimately kept him alive. The human spirit, he discovered, can endure far beyond what most people imagine, especially when paired with determination and ingenuity. Physical endurance was equally crucial. The body, though weakened by hunger, exposure, and dehydration, adapted to the extreme environment. Steven learned to conserve energy, protect against the elements, and make every action count. Simple tasks like fishing, collecting water, or repairing the raft became monumental in their importance. Each successful action reinforced his belief in survival and strengthened his resolve to keep going. Despite the seemingly endless ocean around him, nature, as indifferent and unforgiving as it can be, also taught him invaluable lessons. The ocean, the sun, the wind, the waves, and even the wildlife became both challenge and guide. By paying close attention to subtle signs, cloud patterns, currents, bird movements, Steven learned to navigate uncertainty with skill. The environment, while dangerous, also offered clues, resources, and opportunities for survival for those willing to observe and adapt. Steven's journey reminds us that survival is never just a physical endeavor. It is an intricate dance between mind, body, and environment. Each obstacle is a lesson, each setback an opportunity to adapt, and each moment of fear a chance to strengthen resolve. His experience demonstrates that even in the face of overwhelming odds, careful observation, creativity, and unwavering focus can turn near impossible situations into stories of triumph. Beyond the technical aspects of survival, there is a deeper, human lesson. Hope is not abstract, it is tangible. It manifests in every careful ration, every calculated risk, every moment of mental discipline. Steven's hope was not blind optimism. It was disciplined, active, and essential. It reminded him why he had to keep going, why life is worth fighting for, and why the human spirit can overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. Steven Callahan's 76-day ordeal is now celebrated worldwide as one of the most extraordinary true survival stories. It stands as a testament not only to the power of the human body and mind, but to the importance of preparation, ingenuity, patience, and the will to live. His story continues to inspire adventurers, survivalists, and everyday people alike, proving that with focus, resilience, and hope, humans can endure the unimaginable. As we reflect on this incredible journey, one truth remains clear. Survival is as much about mental strength and ingenuity as it is about physical endurance. Nature will always challenge us, but the human spirit, when cultivated with courage, creativity, and determination, can endure and overcome. Steven Callahan's story is not just about surviving the Atlantic Ocean. It is about the indomitable will to live, the lessons learned from extreme adversity, and the limitless potential of human resilience.